your last day of your holidays to join us here on Zoom. My name is Elaine Losher. I'm a primary school teacher working as a special ed teacher in a school in North Dublin. I'm joined here as co-chair Jessalyn Henry and Andrew Phelan, and they will introduce themselves in a moment. The purpose really of our Zoom today is in response to the meeting that was held with the Minister and the various stakeholders. Obviously, we've all seen the various reports on social media, and, you know, we're all somewhat, I suppose, deflated, feel very let down and disappointed. So the purpose really of today is to find out, how can we do more? What do we need to do next to ensure that the schools we return to are safe for ourselves, our staff, our pupils, and all the associated families? Thank you. Andrew, do you want to go next, or Jessalyn, whoever?
Yeah, sure, I don't mind. Hi everyone, Andrew Phelan is my name. I'm a secondary school teacher here in Dublin. I teach PE for the last 20 years. And the first thing I'd like to say is brilliant, well done to everybody who's organised this meeting. I'm just watching behind the scenes here, and I'm in awe at what's going on and how they're operating it. And they're not professionals. We're not the big trade unions or a big company with an IT company doing this. It's literally teachers sitting behind the screen operating all of this. So I think a big virtual round of applause to all of those activists who are pulling this off, and the webinar, of course, the last day. It's really enheartening to see. I'm delighted to see it. Yeah, look, I said my piece really on the webinar the last time about the situation that we find ourselves in, and the blame firmly lining, I suppose, at the government, who have refused countless times to listen to the trade unions in terms of the mitigation measures that we request in schools in order to make them safe for ourselves and for our students. And of course, if you go through social media, you will see a lot of people saying about the unions, why are they bringing this up now, 2 days before school, etc. Well, again, I want to reiterate, the reality is that this has been mentioned countless times over the last 2 years. It's been raised in the media by the trade unions. It's been raised at the meetings with the department by the trade unions for absolutely months. And the government has done absolutely nothing. The department has done nothing except peddle out the same phrases time and time again ad nauseum, without any facts to back up what they're saying. It's just the 5 same sentences, keep looking straight ahead, smile and say the 5 same sentences. It's disgraceful, to be quite honest with you. I understand in a pandemic, some information needs to be withheld, etc. But literally to have 5 sentences and that's your information to the public is incredible. And not taking any questions really on the issues. On the trade unions, the first day the ACI came out with an absolutely very strong statement. It was really, really good. The TUI came out with a statement after that. In my view, not as strong. It was kind of more leaving the blame, not the blame, but the responsibility on individual schools, which is in fact the government policy anyway in advancing school autonomy. So it kind of plays into their hands. And the INTO then again, in my view, and clearly on social media and elsewhere, it was quite a weak statement. But I do want to say one thing, and I suppose it's the reality of the situation that the trade unions do find themselves in, and that is the 1990 Industrial Relations Act. The unions could not have directed people not to go back to work on Thursday, because to do that, by law, they would have need to have a ballot, and a ballot would have taken a few weeks, and you would have had to give 5 or 7 days notice to not go back. So the reality is they couldn't have done that. Now, I know the ASTI done it the last time, but they did have a ballot at that time in order, in their back pocket, in order to take that action to say last January that they weren't going back. Whether that ballot would have been still in existence this time round, I don't know. Maybe not. But in any sense, the ACI, again, as you can see, were on their own in this whole situation. you probably look at the likes of Chicago and other countries where you can see the teachers refusing to go back in a matter of days. They have a completely different system there where they can ballot online, and where they don't have any days notice to issue, they can just take their industrial action. So we are in a very different situation. That's not to absolve anything. I understand people are disappointed and all the rest of it. And that's why we're having this meeting today, to see what can we do at this stage. But that's just the lie of the land, I suppose, as to where we are at currently in terms of the trade unions and what we can do. And I suppose we get to that, and I'm sure the speakers from the floor are going to allude to some of these points, who may have experience within the trade union movement as well. But listen, I think I want to give Justin a chance to come in, and then I want to hear, I suppose, people from the floor and see where we can take this. So thank you anyway again for having me, everybody.
Thanks, Andrew. So, I'm Jessalyn Henry. I'm an SNA in North Dublin. And I got involved here basically because SNAs have very specific role within our schools, which is very hands-on. And, there's a lot of very specific, I suppose, worries for us in terms of the role that we do in our schools. So I'm basically here to give the SNA point of view. And, I had never called for school closures or for anything like that up until this. And just last night, with what happened and the lack of extra mitigation factors given to schools, I was just very disillusioned, very disappointed. And just, I feel that we need to do something going forward as a grassroots organisation, and just for us all to get together as teachers, SNAs, to fight these decisions from the Department of Education and to try and make our schools a safe environment for all of us, our students, teachers, our families, and everybody else involved.
Just to reiterate there, everybody, anyone who's speaking on this is doing so from their own personal viewpoint. We're not representing anyone other than ourselves, just to make that clear from the outset. Thank you.
Hi everyone, this is just one of the Zoom admins here, just to explain to people why we have two different links going. Free Zoom accounts have their limitations. So if you had RSVP'd and indicated that you wish to speak, we sent you the Zoom link, whereas if you just wanted to attend and listen to the contributions, then you're watching through an unlisted YouTube stream. We are still getting through the RSVPs because they're still coming in thick and fast. So if any of your colleagues are still waiting for their link, please just ask them to be patient. And also, of course, if anybody wants to speak, you can send an email to glorteachers@gmail.com and we will add you to the Zoom call. Otherwise, you are able to send in a comment through the YouTube stream and one of us can relay it here on the call on your behalf. Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Have we Barbara on the line? Was Barbara going to speak?
Yes, hi.
Thanks, Barbara.
My name is Barbara Kelleher. I'm going to present a letter that was sent by Parents and School Staff United Ireland on the 31st of December 2021 for Irish Government, NEFIT, HSE, HPSC, Department of Health, TUSLA, Ombudsman for Children, all ministers, TDs and public representatives, all school unions and all associated state-funded organisations. Our group has strongly advocated for increasing mitigation measures in schools since the beginning of this pandemic. In February 2021, we published a detailed investigative report highlighting our concerns regarding safety in schools during this pandemic. This report was sent to NEFIT, HSE and the government. The calls to action from this report were further reiterated in a detailed letter sent in August 2021. Despite the fact we included international peer-reviewed evidence and best practice for schools, staff and children in our reports and letters, It appears the government have instead reduced proactive and protective measures and have subsequently put thousands of children, school staff, and their families at risk during this pandemic. On this, we're now condemning any government organisation or public health position, policy, or plan which means that schools will reopen in their current state, especially with the highly transmissible Omicron variant in circulation, and with approximately 1 in 2 of all people PCR tested for COVID in Ireland getting a positive result. For every right reason, we want schools to stay open, but only when it's safe. Our calls to action. We believe schools should only be reopened when community transmission is low, and all children and staff are provided with the proper preventative protocols and mitigations, including medical grade masks, N95 FFP2, recommended for all staff and students in all schools. HEPA filtration units are installed in all rooms in schools, CO2 level monitors in every room. Children aged 5 to 12 who opt in are fully vaccinated and protected prior to return to school. Children aged 12 to 18 who received 2 vaccine doses, 3 months plus, offered booster vaccines now. Proper test, trace, and isolate protocols, contact tracing, are fully resumed and functional in primary, secondary schools and childcare facilities, with public health taking back over the responsibility for identifying and notifying close contacts from school principals, timely, accessible, in line with international standards. Mass serial screen testing of all school staff and students is immediately implemented, and this can be done in a number of ways, 3 times a week, but then backed up with full retrospective PCR-based outbreak investigation, or antigen only, but carried out daily, as successfully done in a targeted manner for close contacts in the UK. Implement much tighter controls on community transmission outside our schools to minimise the risk inside our schools. We have choices to make, and we'll have to make schools the highest priority if they're to open safely any time in the near future. Remote learning options offered to all who require it, to provide for proper physical distancing in classrooms, and to give medically vulnerable children and families the choice. Remote working offered to medically vulnerable school staff based on own GP consultants' medical certifications. This is up to the Department of Education to provide this. HBSC, HSE, COVID-19 Data Hub reports must include all data, including index cases, breakdown of cases, hospitalizations, deaths of staff and children's age groups, in line with international age group reporting standards, ages 0 to 4, 5 to 12, 13 to 18. It's the absolute responsibility of the state and those employed or funded by the state to ensure the protection of all persons' health and life, which of course includes children. Exposing our unvaccinated youngest children to this virus would be irresponsible and should not be allowed to happen. This is the largest unvaccinated group in the country, and to crowd them into buildings with inadequate mitigation is dangerous, careless, and unethical. The direct impact of COVID-19 as a disease is that children's school staff and their families can become acutely unwell, can be hospitalised or worse, and or could develop long-term health conditions, including 3% who will experience cognitive deficits. This also adds an additional strain on our already overwhelmed health system, both in the short and long term. Secondary impacts from allowing COVID-19 to circulate through our communities and schools includes children having to self-isolate out of school, teachers, SNAs, support staff becoming ill, not being able to teach, parents, guardians needing time off work to care for sick children and or care for themselves if they contract it, which in turn can potentially lead to a vicious cycle of financial, employment issues, and so on. Collectively, this can also impact on children's mental and physical health and well-being, as it can their educators in schools. There's a high probability that schools will collapse very soon after reopening under current conditions with its current high levels of community transmission and inadequate mitigations in place. We now implore you to do the right thing. Immediately implement our calls to action and stand on the right side of history to keep children, school staff and their families safe and protected from this deadly and debilitating virus. Yours sincerely, Parents and School Staff United Ireland.
As we have had a number of people join in the last few minutes, I just want to go back over to really reiterate that those of us who are speaking today are doing so from our own personal viewpoint. Also, when you were RSVPing, you were asked to specify if you wish to speak. So if you had ticked that you wish to speak, you are on the Zoom call. But if you ticked that you did not wish to speak, then you are watching an unlisted YouTube stream of the meeting and can take part in the YouTube comments. And I would encourage you to do so. These comments will then be relayed over the microphone by one of our volunteers who's working in the background. Also, another method is if you want to email the Glor teachers email. It's glorteachers@gmail.com, and we can then add you to the Zoom call if you feel you really do have something to add. I hope that clarifies for anyone who joined in the last couple of minutes. Thank you.
Okay, I think what we'll do is we'll open it to the floor now, and we'll see what you have to say. That's the whole purpose of this. It is a town hall meeting after all, and we want to get teachers' views, SNA's views, parents' views, and students' views, if there is any here, on this issue as well, and kind of where we go from here. So I think we'll open it up to the floor. Again, I don't know how to leave people in. I presume that's going to happen behind the scenes, but at this point, I'd like to say we'll open to the floor. So if people want to indicate to come in.
Yeah, Andrew, just to for clarification, we only have 18 people on the Zoom call here, and the rest are viewing via YouTube. So what we might do is we might take the people who are here on the Zoom call first. I would suggest that they write into the chat box, and then we can just take them in that order, if that makes best sense. And after that, one of our team can read out anything remaining that is on YouTube, if that is okay with everybody.
Absolutely. Who wants to go first? Okay, Vicky DeVren, I'm going to bring you in. You've indicated, so the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I'm just going to give a full disclaimer at this point that I'm actually sitting here 7 weeks pregnant and having quite bad Braxton Hicks contractions. So if my voice goes funny, that's why. I shouldn't have to be doing this, but unfortunately that's where we are at the moment. So I would just like to speak today about my own case, but also my own case. I think there's many other teachers who are suffering or experiencing the same conditions as I am at present as a pregnant or as a medically vulnerable teacher. So, I mean, yesterday was just one of the worst days of my career as teacher. I'm actually on maternity leave at the moment. I shouldn't have to be engaging with what's going on in the education sector at the moment, but my partner is still teaching as a secondary school teacher. I learned on Monday that if he tests positive for COVID-19 within 10 days of my due date or of me going into labour, he will not be allowed to attend the birth. He will not be allowed into our maternity hospital. Restrictions are being reimposed in maternity hospitals at present. Couple that with last night, the CMO coming out and saying that it is inevitable that school communities will contract the virus in the coming weeks. And that pretty much says to us that there's a very good chance that I will be labouring alone in 2 or 3 weeks' time, which is absolutely terrifying. At the same time, visiting hours are being eliminated across maternity hospitals. This is dependent now on different maternity hospitals. Some are drastically reducing visiting hours for partners. Some are completely eliminating them. So what that means in reality is that my partner will be expected to teach and mix with 200 plus students and families, or people with students coming from 200 plus families on a daily basis in a secondary school, but will not be allowed to visit his own child. And that just does not make sense to me. That logic is completely, it does not, it really just doesn't make sense. At the same time, we're hearing that, there's no public health advice is that schools are safe. There are really real consequences for pregnant teachers if they contract the virus. Pregnant teachers are being put on blood thinning injections for several weeks after they test positive. This isn't a small thing. This isn't something that they'll just get over. This is a huge trauma as part of their pregnancy that it can be completely avoided. And it just blows my mind that this is deemed an acceptable risk, that we are being dehumanized that much and devalued that much as humans, that it's more important that we turn up for work because our personal lives, our pregnancies don't matter. As well as that, what's happening in reality is that people have no other choice but to go on sick leave. And that is the reality. It was the same thing that happened in September and this is now the same cohort of teachers who are now facing into their due dates and giving birth at this time in this wave of Omicron is the same cohort of teachers who fell into being unvaccinated returning to schools in September. It's just how the timing has worked out. So from the very beginning, there has been challenges, there has been battles to fight. And it's exhausting. As I said, people went on sick leave. This is adding to the sub-crisis because I was not sick when I wasn't vaccinated, but it was not safe for me to go into school. And I felt that very, very strongly. And so did 3 of my obstetricians and 3 consultants who wrote very strong letters that were submitted to Medmark, and Medmark overruled every single one of them and said that I was fit to go back to work. So what happened was I had to wait 2 weeks on sick leave until I was fully vaccinated. I was willing to teach my students online for those 2 weeks. I would have taught them, they would have gotten tuition, but because I was forced to go on sick leave, I didn't have a choice. They didn't have any tuition, so they lost 2 weeks of tuition there that was really not needed. That's going to continue to happen. As well as that, we have Medmark also overruling consultants and GPs for medically high-risk teachers. I've heard anecdotally of so many cases of that. I can't speak and I wouldn't try and speak out for other teachers, but I think it's important that everyone is aware that this is happening on a very, very regular basis. And we have just been so let down. About 2 weeks before Christmas, I sent in, we have a separate group on Facebook for a voice for medically vulnerable and pregnant teachers. We did a survey. It was an informal survey, but one of the questions was, and this group spans all unions, are you satisfied with your union representative? The overwhelming majority of our members said no. And this was forwarded on to all of the unions. So I feel like that's been ignored. We do feel completely forgotten as a minority group and just completely let down. And one thing I will say is that last night I was just in floods of tears to my fiance, who is also an ASTI member, both of us are, with the press release from the ASTI that said that they were dismayed. Well, all I can say is we were distraught, because the reality for us is that, as I said, there's a really good chance at this point in time that he's going to contract COVID in the next 2 weeks and I'm going to be labouring alone. And I just can't even fathom how I will ever be able to return to a profession that treats me with such little regard as a human after that. So that's it. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak and to bring attention to what's going on, I guess, for our minority. Thank you.
God, Vicky, well done. That's not an easy thing to do. Everyone here, I think I speak for everybody when I say we're just so sorry for the situation that you've been put in. It's not easy to speak out for yourself, and it's not a time when you need to have extra stress on your body, so make sure to look after yourself. Just before we move on to the next speaker, we got an email in through glorteachers@gmail.com from a teacher. So she says, please keep it anonymous. I'm only 11 weeks and I haven't had my scan yet. In the first wave, pregnant staff were working from home, but once vaccines came along, this precaution was removed. Pregnant women are at an increased risk of complications if they get COVID-19. I think it's a third of pregnant women end up in hospital. Even with vaccines, they still get sick. I know it's only anecdotal, but I have 2 friends who are pregnant now who have COVID and they're very, very unwell. They have to go for scans every 2 weeks to monitor the growth of the baby. It's such a worry that this can be avoided. Nurses who are pregnant can be redeployed into a non-patient facing role. Why can't this be done for teachers? There's plenty of children at home during this pandemic because they're high risk that pregnant teachers could work remotely. I just don't see how she can willingly send us into an unsafe environment. The Minister for Education will probably say that those children are being catered for by their own school and class teacher, but from anecdotal evidence, that isn't happening. And how could it? How can a teacher split themselves in 2, preparing and delivering lessons in person to 28 or more children in the classroom and providing online content for a high-risk child at home? It's not feasible or logistically possible. I'm an autism class teacher. I'm 11 weeks pregnant and I'm petrified. I do not feel safe at work. The children I teach cannot socially distance from me as I need to sit down next to each of them for them to do their work. It's such a worry and I'm genuinely scared of getting COVID.
Thanks for that, Vicky. Thank you very much. I think none of us could respond. We were stunned. We know it's happening because we hear it all the time, but when you hear it fresh and with emotion like that, it does stun you. And one thing struck me that you mentioned in my contribution to start is about the unions, and it sounded almost like I was absolving them because of the Industrial Relations 1990 Act, but absolutely not. Absolutely, there should have been ballot months and months ago. So it's ready in the back pocket for something like this, so that they're not in this situation where things like this occur and they can't actually do anything about it. I think the unions should absolutely, all the trade unions should absolutely have done way more than they have done. It reminds me of the Braveheart clip in Braveheart, where it turns around and it says, "Great speech, now what are you going to do?" It's just, it's incredible. But thank you very, very much for sharing that with us. Paul Murphy, I think you've indicated to speak, so I'll bring you in there.
Thanks a lot, Andrew. So I'm Paul. I'm the spokesperson for PBP on education. First of all, Vicky, real solidarity goes out to you. I mean, that is a horrific story all the way through, and fair play to everybody involved in this meeting in speaking out in the context whereby large sections of the media, the government are trying are trying to demonize teachers and those people who are saying, look, schools have to be safe. And the bottom line is that the government is sacrificing the health of teachers, of students, of the wider community in order to be able to say, oh, we kept the schools open. That's their bottom line. It doesn't matter if the schools are safe or not. It doesn't matter to what extent COVID spreads in the schools. They want to have the schools open and be able to say this is this great political success. And, they're playing a very dangerous game in terms of lying about the science, which they've been doing. And unfortunately, they've involved NPHET in doing, which undermines the whole public health advice when they're clearly lying about schools being this safe place. And then for a while, they weren't a safe place. And now they're back to being a safe place again for when it suits them. And certainly from our point of view, I think in agreement with you is that the bottom line is that the schools should have been made safe. The schools should still be made as safe as is possible. And then we weigh the importance of education and so on. But if you haven't done that, then you can't really be pushing for the schools to be opening in the way that's being done. And that's what they're doing. So 100% support. There's one thing maybe just for your information. I mean, we all know that they've ignored the evidence that has been said to them for well over a year. And there was a moment kind of in December where they came under so much public pressure that eventually they were forced to say, well, we'll look at the HEPA filters and maybe we'll roll out some grants or whatever. And they've but even in that moment, we managed to get a bill passed at second stage, which from second stage is a long way, unfortunately, to it actually becoming law. But in the debate where the government voted for it, it was unanimously passed, and the government said, the minister's response was, oh, we all have to do this as quickly as possible. Everything has to move. If we can do this by regulation, he said, I'll pick up the phone to you this afternoon and we'll work out the best way to do this. And then we heard nothing. Like, we contacted their office again and again and again, no response. And then we got a letter, a big formal letter, a week and a half later, just talking about all the problems and why it'd be difficult and unconstitutional and this and that and the other. And then here we are a month later, and they haven't done any of the things, that the legislation would have required them to do in terms of ventilation, filtration, all of those things. So in terms of, just to finish, what to do, obviously it's up to yourselves as teachers to decide exactly what to do, but some ideas. So one, obviously from our point of view, the Dáil's not back, unfortunately, for a couple of weeks, which is a problem. I think we should be pushing that the Dáil should come back early in the context of this massive crisis, 20,000 cases a day, massive understatement. They're letting COVID rip through the population in general. And schools are on the front line, so we can try to do that. But in any case, we will raise our voices, press releases, try and get it to the media, etc., and try and speak out about what's happening in the schools and speak up for those who are saying the schools have to be made safe, and the position that you're being put in. Secondly, a simple thing, I think it would really be good to have a lot of social media tomorrow about the real conditions. You know what I mean? You're going to have temperatures of 1 or 2 degrees. The only safety that people have is opening the windows. Like, having stories about that to explain what this means in reality for students, for teachers, I think would be helpful. But the third thing is that, I do take Andrew's point about the 1990 Industrial Relations Act and the problem of balloting and so on. But I do think you just need to put that on the agenda. And again, that's for yourselves to decide. But even immediately pushing to say, well, we need to have we need to start the process of balloting, because this issue is going to go on, clearly. But also, secondly, to say that, on health and safety grounds, if you're working in very low temperatures, in situations where COVID is rampant throughout the community, etc., there are certain avenues that are open to you in that context. I mean, it is a bit tenuous in a sense, but it certainly would win public support. People would understand, oh, this isn't safe for people who are working in these environments. So I think there are things to consider. Thanks a lot.
Sorry, if I could just interject there, that's actually something that we had for further on. It's actually towards the end of the agenda, but we can skip back. So this is the circular relating to minimum temperatures. I don't know, does anybody else want to take this in terms of explaining it? It's fairly self-explanatory.
I can take it if you want, Yana, because I have experience of it already in school early December when our heating keeled over. Basically, the acceptable minimum level of heating in a classroom is 16 degrees. So there are various kind of instances where you kind of have to keep an eye on it. So if you arrive into your classroom and within an hour of the school being open or you arriving, the temperature is already at 16 and there is no indication that it's going to increase above that, then a call has to be made. And that basically is that the school has to be closed and children have to be sent home. There also, I know we have little excerpts of the circular here, but there's also something in the circular where it says, even if the temperature is at 16 and you can't send children home, you're not required to teach. You are required to merely supervise, because at that temperature, no one is going to be able to concentrate. So it's possibly worth looking out for that circular if you can get your hands on it, or asking your principal. And just to make yourselves aware that the minimum temperature is 16 degrees. If there's no indication that it's going to increase after an hour, there is cover there for you to be able to close the school and send children home, and that there is no requirement to teach, that it would merely be the teacher in a supervisory capacity. I don't know if anyone wants to add any more of that. Just from my own personal experience, our heating had keeled over. It hadn't come on at all. And I think by 12 o'clock, we probably waited too long, but by 12 o'clock, we had to make a decision to send the children home. So there is the facility there, if just to make people aware of it. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything to that. If they do, by all means, feel free. Thank you.
Hi, Elaine. I'll just jump in there now. My name is Deirdre O'Toole. I'm a primary school teacher and parent in County Meath. I teach junior infants, and the windows in my classroom open about 2 or 3 inches because they have safety catches. So depending on when your classroom was built, they have different types of windows. And so my windows have only been open partially. And this came up in the ventilation guidelines from the department. And again, today in the documentation they sent out to principals saying that you only have to open your windows partially. But even with windows open partially, my room was at 12 degrees. I would say probably, well, it's like a guesstimate, but I'd say at least half of classrooms are not reaching that 16 degrees on a daily basis, certainly through November and December. And there were days in December where my junior infants were complaining of the cold. And, you know, young children, they don't complain about being cold. They're running around outside with no coats on when we're all wrapped up. But they were sitting there in their coats, and we have a very active class. They're sitting there in their coats complaining of the cold. The principal came into the classroom, and one of the kids said, I won't say her name, I'm freezing. But what can you do? I close the windows and then I'm putting them at risk, and the CO2 monitor goes red. So we don't have the option to keep the airflow going without HEPA filters if we want our children to be comfortable. And they can't concentrate. You know, it's very unfair on them. We're putting them in this situation where they're all crowded together with no masks up to second class, and then we're also making them cold. It's very, very unfair. So I don't know, does anyone else want to speak on that? We'll probably move on at this stage, I'd say.
Okay, thank you, Paul, for your contribution there. It was really excellent. And I know People Before Profit has been very supportive of school staff over the last number of months, and well, nearly years now at this stage. Next up, we have Carly Bailey, if she's there, from Social Democrats.
Hi, how's it going? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can, Carly, yeah.
Great, thanks a million. I'm a Social Democrats councillor. I'm actually also here on behalf of Gary Gannon, who's our education spokesperson. I'm really sorry he can't actually just be here this afternoon, and we had another meeting to attend to. So I work with Gary, and I suppose one of the major briefs that we have is the education part. So we do a lot of the work in the office around this issue. I suppose I just want to introduce myself a little bit. So I'm a councillor. I'm also on a board of management of a developing school, a post-primary developing school. So, I mean, that adds just another element into the mix of all of this when you're looking at it that way. I'm also a parent of 2 kids in a primary school, also a developing school. And just before Christmas, we had 12 teachers out as a result of COVID or isolation. And it was just absolute pandemonium. You know, it was really horrific for the school. I wanted also just to say to Vicky and the anonymous teacher that came in before that I wish them the absolute best. I hope everything goes okay. And I can't even begin to imagine actually how upsetting this has been. I really hope everything goes okay. I'll leave it. I know other people have said things to that, but I hope things go okay. But like the burden, I suppose I just want to talk about a little bit about how our school leaders have been basically left to just look after all of this. And then in amongst that, the teaching staff who are taking on responsibilities within our schools. We have COVID officers, we have all of these things, and how we're seeing it all the time, constantly feeling that they just don't have enough information, that they don't feel qualified enough to make these big important decisions. You know, that when you've got parents screaming for HEPA filters when they weren't part of the mix initially, and parents beginning to buy them and that sort of thing. And it's really, really difficult to manage a school at the best of times, but then you've got this on top of it. We're seeing, you know, a huge loss of school staff and school leaders actually as a result of this. That's going to really hit us hard in the next couple of years. So I just want to say a huge thank you, I suppose, to all of our school leaders, all of our school teachers, all of our SNAs, SUTs, our school staff, our secretaries, our caretakers, our cleaners, every single person who is just breaking their back trying to make sure our schools are open and are safe as possible, and looking for the best that we can for all the staff, obviously, but obviously for our children, and on our behalf, you know. I suppose what I probably will just touch on, is I don't want to repeat things that have already been kind of talked about here. It's things like the mitigation measures, and you know, we've finally seen some things come through, but not good enough, not quick enough, as always. We've been calling for these mitigation measures for since the first time around, and we've been asking for these things to be brought in, and very, very strongly the whole of last year. And then, to be fair, most of the opposition have been very, very strong in calling for these things. The government just aren't listening. But if we look at things like, I suppose something that doesn't get talked about often enough, I think, is around hybrid learning. Gary was talking about it this morning on Twitter, and it's something that we've looked at in the office quite a lot. Like, if you look at countries like Estonia, now, to be fair to Estonia, they've had this sort of hybrid system, sort of digital learning has been sort of a big piece of their education system for quite some time now. It's not something that just came in over COVID. But as a result of that, they were able to really adapt very quickly when the pandemic hit, and things went a lot more smoothly. But lots of other countries have since adapted to it during the course of the pandemic. I mean, there's lots of different countries out there that you can have a look at: Brazil, Peru, Rwanda, Afghanistan, Pakistan, loads of different countries for whatever reason have had to sort of bring this about, depending on what's happening in their own countries. So it is not impossible by a long shot, but it does need a lot of funding. There's no two ways about that. And it needs the government to take this seriously as something to consider. I think what we have found so frustrating throughout this whole crisis, this whole time, is how binary this has been. It's like, do they open? Do they not open? But that should never have been the conversation in the first place. It should have been some form of hybrid, blended learning. You have some children in, you have some children at home, you switch it around. And then those that are medically compromised or who have people at home who might not be safe could stay at home and learn from home if they needed to. You have staff who needs to be out for whatever reason, able to maybe teach remotely if they're not sick. You know, there's all sorts of ways that we could have done this so much better. So I just want to end on that, I guess. It's very frustrating that they're not listening, but I just want to say thank you very much for having the opportunity to speak here. We'll continue to support and do whatever we can, and please continue to reach out to us. Thanks.
Thank you, Carly. I think we might need to, are we going to go to some comments that were on the YouTube feed?
We are, yeah. So one of our volunteers who has been keeping an eye on YouTube should be there ready to read them out.
Yeah,
great.
Everybody. So
thanks, Janet.
I've just grouped a few of them here together. So I'll read a few out. If anyone wants to make a comment at the end of the group, just let me know. So first we had for, I think it was Barbara here, I might have messed this up, but great to see SNAs represented in many schools. SNAs are in the majority, particularly special schools. Jessalyn is well placed to represent our views as an SNA herself. So that was for that one. Well done, Barbara. All of your points are very valid and should be listened to and acted upon by government bodies and public health. So just some nice comments there for those two. This was Vicky, I think. As an at-risk teacher due to an underlying condition, can empathise fully with this. We are totally abandoned. And then, thank you, Vicky. You should not have to be dealing with this. You and your partner should be looking forward to the birth of your baby, not dealing with the risk of COVID. Okay, I'll just keep going. Nursing homes also. My mother-in-law will now only receive 2 half-hour visits per week at 1 person per visit. Visitors wearing full PPE after spending 6 hours in a classroom with 30 unmasked people. We have a few here about government. The doll doesn't return for a number of weeks. School leaders, staff, and board of managements have not had a break since Christmas 2019. Why is this unsafe school opening being pushed so strongly by government? And a possible response: this is not about health and safety. This is all about a government and a minister thinking of election 2025. We are the casualties. We have one here from a student, actually. I'm a 6th year student and nobody I know is going in this week. And another one here, could we get a hashtag campaign across all social medias, campaigns such as the one we SNAs had? And finally, my 10-year-old this morning said, I'm looking forward to seeing my friends, but it's so cold and my hands hurt when I write. This is madness. So those are all the comments I had up until this moment. There might be a few more now, but I'll come back to them later because I need to read them first.
Proofreading, that's great, thank you. Could we go next to Ruth Coppinger? And we're also asking any local representatives or politicians to please keep it brief, as today is about the school staff and the families affected. Thank you.
Hi, am I on camera?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I'm not coming up on my own here. Okay, I'm speaking as a teacher in secondary school and as a parent as well. I just want to make a few points. I think it's been put out about closing the schools, that schools aren't safe is the key point. There's been no mitigation in 2 years, bar a few monitors. And I think the key things that we need to open is ventilation, as has been said, proper N95 masks, and a testing and tracing system that was taken out. I think we should be calling for a circuit breaker to slow the spread, which is at its height or coming into its peak in the next week, to allow mitigation be put in that the government hasn't done for 2 years, and of children and teenagers in terms of children for the first time and teenagers in terms of boosters take place. Now, I can totally understand how parents feel a lot of frustration and a lot of pressure because of school closures should that happen. And I think that there would be a case for looking at special education needs and, you know, possibly staggering back. If you had workers in the schools, if you had parents and students together in charge of the process, and that's what you could sit down and discuss how this could be done safely. Of course, we don't have that. And I think, I just want to say a couple of things. This is an international phenomenon. This is not unique to Ireland. Like all around the world, teachers are in conflict with governments because they're being pushed back into schools that simply aren't safe. And with regard to Vicky earlier, I think there's no question the fact that it's predominantly female workforce in education and in health, you know, allows them further to treat workers badly and not to take the concern seriously. I think it's a scandal the way pregnant teachers and pregnant workers have been treated. So just in terms of what we do now, because I think that's we're going to be tomorrow, and this is going to be key. I have to say, as a long-time trade unionist and somebody who's been involved in helping people who are on strike or fighting battles, I'm extremely disappointed in the 3 teacher unions for the last 4 months, to be honest, because they haven't been making the case on behalf of their members or on behalf of children and young people. And with regard to the recent meetings, I'm a member of the ASTI. I do think the ASTI was better of the 3 in at least having a standing committee meeting ahead of meeting Norma Foley and, you know, making the statement that they made. However, the statement really didn't go very far because nothing has arisen from it. And, you know, the TUI, and I'm in a dual union school, putting an individual school should act individually is completely against the whole concept of being in a union and taking collective action. And I think the primary teachers I feel even more sorry for than secondary because you've even less protection than we have. And there is no question the frustration that I've seen from members of the INTO, you know, on all forums on social media in recent days. We need to come together. We need to come together as workers, as parents, and as students to unite to demand safe schools. But we need to begin organising together. With regard to what was said about the Industrial Relations Act, I have to say that the Industrial Relations Act is cited continually for the last 30 years by trade union leaders. I'm not saying Andrew is doing this at all. as a reason why they can't do anything. The Debenhams workers weren't cowed by the Industrial Relations Act. You know, if they had sat and studied the Industrial Relations Act, the strike would have been over within a week. Instead, it went on for a year. Unfortunately, they didn't get the support that they needed. And it's been a feature of COVID that the trade union leadership, be it in retail, be it in education, be it in health, of course, where the health workers have been completely worked to the bone and undervalued and underpaid, or be it in transport, that the trade union leadership haven't been up to the task. And every worker should have the right not to work environment and to walk out of an unsafe environment. And we should have the strength to do that if necessary, and to ask questions about it later. Because I really do, I think that the idea of any excuse, they could have had a ballot months ago. They've been not attentive to what the needs of the members have been. They've been afraid of public criticism and public reaction. I'm well aware of that. I get it myself. But we have to withstand that. And, you know, we have to demand that parents have got leave to mind their children if needs be. You know, that parents have got paid leave and put the pressure on that way. But I have to say, last night I saw a post by a bus worker that I know who was very disappointed that the unions had conceded on this. So I do think there is a widespread realisation that schools simply aren't safe and that we have gotten over the message about ventilation. I do think the opposition and the Dáil, notwithstanding Paul and others, have been quite weak on this as well. I watched programmes where Sinn Féin, for example, you know, weren't really putting the case, and they are the largest opposition party. And I say it not to have a go, but just I think that's been a reality. I think people are afraid to be seen to be calling for safety in schools. In some way, it'll pitch you against parents. But the reality is that for 3 months, this has been allowed to develop and to escalate. For 4 months, in reality, I wrote an article 4 months ago, and unfortunately, everything in it has been borne out. The disease, you know, the COVID was allowed to develop unchecked. So just on what we do, I think next week when we go back, there's going to be, not next week, tomorrow when we go back, but by next week, there will be all sorts of problems. And we really should look at coming together, all 4 unions, plus students, in some kind of a public forum, you know, where we have got the capacity to have lots of people on it, because I just think it's more powerful as a form of meeting. And thanks to the organisers for organising this today. Well done to you all.
Thanks for that, Ruth. I think we were going to have Camira next.
Hiya, thanks a million, Elaine. My name is Camira, and I'm a mainstream class teacher in Dublin. And the reason why I'm speaking today is just I'm at the end of my tether. You know, the definition of madness is doing the same thing and expecting different results. And here we are for round number 2 amongst all the other little battles in between. And I just feel absolutely sapped of any hope that there's any forward planning to not have this happen a third time. It's absolutely frustrating to have a situation, a bad situation that you feel helpless, but it's made infinitely worse when it's avoidable. It was predicted and it's avoidable. This was a choice. And I think there's been a complete hypocrisy of safety logic, 2 meter distances for society, for pubs, for restaurants, for everyone else, versus school, convention centres for TDs, everybody lashed into poorly ventilated rooms for schools. I think everything has been a choice. To have high pupil-teacher ratios, that's a policy. To ignore science and warnings and predictions of NEFIT and other scientific groups, a choice and a policy. To be selective in what data is looked at and how it's interpreted. If you can't find what you don't look for. We opened in September of last year based on the figures that there was no COVID in schools between March and June. There could not have been any because the schools weren't open. It's all selective. Not to invest in HEPA filters and upgrade PPE. This has been going on for nearly 2 years, and no steps have been put in place to put those preventative mitigations in place. not to use contact tracing, the withdrawal of PCR testing, all a choice and a policy, to sell cuts in budgets, educational budget as generosity and a win or a victory, that's a choice and a policy. To underfund special needs children and their necessary services, but then cart them out as a reason to open schools. It's used as a logic to open schools, and then they're absolutely abandoned in between. And it's the schools and the parents that have to deal with the practicalities of the situation. Not to plan, not to prepare, and not to lead has been a policy. Everything that has happened so far has been focused on optics, the perception of voters, and maintaining the status quo. There has been nothing constructive, progressive, or no problem solving been done. I think the narrative of the binary choice, as I think Elaine said, is completely reductive, and it's unhelpful. I think there has to be a discussion of other methods. The amount of time that has been spent talking about should schools open or should they stay closed, in the time and energy spent in that, we could have 1,000 different solutions to this problem. And I think that needs to happen. I think there's been a collective agreement to just forget Joe McHugh's document that outlined a few vague suggestions that could be built upon, that it's not one or the other. And I think we need to kind of zoom out. And I think the whole idea of teachers versus or school staff versus anybody else is completely pointless, and it serves the purpose of having us in a tailspin, and meanwhile this happens again and again and again. Anybody who's feeling strongly about it means that they want the best for the children, and we need to focus on that commonality and build forward. I think I think it's the Eisenhower matrix where it's asking, are things urgent or important? Schools opening is so important, and I think we're all agreed on that. But the question is, by having these meetings like the day before schools open, it means that it's now urgent. I think it's more important than it is urgent. If we're going to open schools, which I think that we need to, it has to be done safely, it has to be done properly, and it has to be done in a sustainable way. So I think that there needs to be a circuit breaker while we put safety mitigations in place and plan for hybrid learning and different iterations of that, all of which is us effectively doing the job that the Department of Education should have been doing in the first place, and that it's sent out in a tiniest fashion so that it can be implemented in the best way possible. And I think if that doesn't happen, we're worried about short-term teacher shortages. If things don't change drastically, there's going to be a mass exodus from the profession, never mind the union. And I think a lot needs to change. So that's just my 2 cents.
That's great, Camira. Thanks a million for speaking so passionately there. Guys, we're really conscious of the time. It's just gone 5, and I know it's approaching dinner time, particularly for people who have children. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to take a comment regarding SNAs from our YouTube stream. Then we'll have Aidan or Reardon, we'll have Sarah, and we might just go quickly then to suggestions for actions and next steps, and then wrap it up, because it is the last day of the holidays. We all do want to try and get some downtime before tomorrow morning. Okay, thanks again, Camira.
Yeah.
So can we have our YouTube stream? I think Paul, our admin, is going to support us there. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, it was just a really good comment that I saw. There's been lots of really good comments, and hopefully we can get some time to get back to them at the end. But just someone said almost every speaker is leaving out SNAs in their contributions, and Ruth Coventry referring to 3 unions. There are 4 force represented SNAs. Hashtag respect for SNAs, and I think it's a good point that people should keep the fact that there are 4 unions and many different groups who are skin in the game. That's all. You can move on.
Okay, so next, Aidan, are you free to speak?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yeah, thanks a million.
Okay. Yeah, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. I won't speak long. I know you want to hear from teachers. Just a little background. I was a teacher for 11 years and I was a school principal, but I haven't been in a classroom for 10 years. So the situation obviously has changed in that period of time. Just as the education spokesperson for the Labour Party, To say that we are frustrated with the department and the minister will be an understatement. I give you a small example. I wrote, and other education spokespeople wrote to meet her on the 16th of November, because you could foresee what was happening in schools. You were listening to school principals talking about the issues that they were having. And I wrote to her and asked others to write to her as well, to have a meeting to talk outside the glare of publicity, to relay what we're being told. Because often what happens with principals, as you'll know from people working in the system, is that principals and teachers don't often want to talk about what's happening in their schools publicly, because they want, the student body not to be anxious, they want the parent body not to be anxious, but they also need to have a mechanism of saying what's happening. Substitution was an issue. HEPA filters have been recommended for 18 months. The Mark Ferguson report in April about antigen testing, none of these things acted upon. So whenever we raise these things, we just don't, we get stonewalled, and it's very difficult for us politically. And I know Paul will agree with me, to get interaction with the minister, because we don't get that much FaceTime with her. We even had a debate before Christmas, and it was a 2-hour debate, and half an hour into it, she made her statement and she was gone. I found that deeply frustrating for somebody who look, in politics, you're trying to be solution led around issues like this. And so when we did try to meet her in November, it hasn't happened since. It isn't about this week. And at this point, it's been made time again. It isn't about this week. And the whole thing about this week is like, do they open on Thursday or not? Like, I'm into football, I know a lot of people are. You don't win All-Irelands in September. It's what you do in January and February makes you win All-Ireland in September. The schools could have been opened this week much more successfully, or with an awful lot more confidence from those working in the schools, teachers, SNAs, secretaries, caretakers, if what had been done from September, October, November was done properly. And when, advice was given as to how best we could run our school system. But what the department wants, they want to pit parents against teachers so that they get off the hook. That's what they want. They want a row on Joe Duffy about people ringing up complaining about teachers, and we've all heard it 1,000 times before, and SNAs and all the rest of it. And that's what they tried to do this time last year. You remember, the minister deliberately in a speech made this, the determined position that she was on the side of special education and basically everybody else wasn't. So I wouldn't want to fall into that trap that we get involved in that game that they're trying to play. The thing I'll say, there's a massive cultural issue in the Department of Education. They fundamentally don't believe that health measures are their problem. They think it's the Department of Health. So they will advise their minister, don't you be talking about that. I have a situation in my constituency, a place in my constituency called Dunamead, had one of the highest infection rates in the country there a couple of weeks ago. One of the schools, 55% of the kids were out. The principal could not get anybody on the phone for a week. Now, I listened to the minister this morning about helplines. Tomorrow, we're going to have a situation. I have principals on me all the time saying I have a quarter of my staff are out, 10% of my staff are out. Now, I think there has to be some political reckoning when a minister and a department do not listen to what they've been told. And for them to say that we're following expert advice is not true. They were told by Orla Hegarty 18 months ago about HEPA filters. They were told by Mark Ferguson in April about antigen testing. We recommended every teacher and SNA would be vaccinated, boosted as a priority. I made this case to the Taoiseach myself in November. These things weren't carried out. So look, what do we do now? I am still willing and I still want to meet the minister face to face and to relay these issues, and for this not to be a once-off conversation this week, because as teachers and SNAs and working on the coalface, media moves on. They'll talk about something else next week. We've already moved on to travel tonight about who's getting into country and who isn't. Our biggest mistake would be to let this go and to not have another conversation next week and the week after. Because this week's issue, today or yesterday, is not a failure of this week. It's a failure of last September and the previous September. Last thing I'll say on second level is that I don't believe the Leaving Cert can I think the Leaving Cert has to be rolled out the same way as it was last year. I don't think it's fair on 6-year students to expect them to go back to a 2019 Leaving Cert. It's been severely disrupted. They lost a number of months of in-school learning when they were in 5th year. It's severely disrupted at the moment. I think we are of the view that the hybrid Leaving Cert should be rolled out for 2022. that I think will relieve an awful lot of pressure on teachers as well. I know they have to be involved in the assessed grades side of things, but I think that would be a good move. At least that much could take away from some of the exam-related pressures that second-level schools are into. But anyway, listen, the last thing I say, sorry, because I do have to go and do a bit of dry planning myself. What Vicky said has really stuck with me. And what the child who has her hands are too cold to write, that has stuck with me. And I want more people to relay those issues to me and to other education spokespeople, because that's the human story that I think is going to have to make the difference in the long term. Okay.
That's great, Aidan. Thanks so much for that. Do we have time for Sarah? Sarah, I don't want to put you under pressure, but if you could just maybe comment really quickly.
Yeah, and Elaine, I'm just getting the next bit of slides ready, so just ignore what's coming up on screen from my point of view.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Janet.
Hi, can you hear me there?
We can, yeah.
Thanks a million. I just wanted to say that government and union partnership has not mitigated to protect the children and staff. I don't have confidence in either the leaderships. It's talking about the measures now is like closing the stable door after the horse has bolted. I'm a first class teacher in a Dash Band 1 school. In my community, it's generally lower income, where the parents don't have sick leave entitlement. So children are sent into school unwell, and because the parents have to go to work, that hasn't been looked after either. In terms of sickness and staff going into school tomorrow, the staff that can go in, I've seen it referred to as absenteeism, which it's not. So I'd be grateful for opposition politicians to come out and say that it's not absenteeism, it's sick leave, because people are going into school and they're getting sick there. That's why they have the sick pay there for COVID-related sick leave. And the other thing I'd ask any politicians here today is if there is talk of derogation of our sick pay leave for COVID, that they would support us vocally with regard to that, to defend what we have already. And I think that's the only thing that we have left to us, because people who are going in tomorrow are going in knowing that they're going to catch it, and that's just a kind of a fact at this stage. So yeah, sorry, that's all I have to say. Thanks very much.
That's great, Sarah. Thanks a million. Okay, Jana, do you want us to go through the slide that you have up at the moment?
Yeah, again, we're just all very conscious of time. Could we invite Olive from Parents and School Staff United to read out their response to yesterday's events?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having us again. And again, particularly Vicky stood out to me there, and I did get quite upset listening to that. It's not okay. So we wrote our initial letter that Barbara read out earlier, and this is our response to the decision that the department have made. So we strongly oppose the decision by the Department of Education and Science to reopen schools at the current high level of cases, which are over 21,000 reported as of yesterday, and test positivity rate well over 50% without the following additional measures in place. We want HEPA air filtration units in each classroom and any other poorly ventilated area in a room. FFP2 3-grade masks strongly recommended for all children in primary schools who are able to wear them. Resumption of contact tracing and testing in schools. Clear ventilation protocols, remote learning options for families and children, especially those in high-risk situations, and regular mass screening of school children and school staff. Our group has significant concerns about the strength and veracity of evidence available to NPHET supporting the official position that Irish schools are low-risk environments when community transmission is as high as it is now. I'll just move on to the next screen, please. With 800 children aged 0 to 15 up to 2020 already hospitalised from COVID, it is certain that more children will require paediatric hospital care over the coming weeks and months after the return to school. Thousands more will develop long COVID, approximately between 10 and 30%, according to most research out to date. Current data suggests that between 9 and 10 children are being hospitalised every day. For context, out of all hospitals every day, all hospitalisations to date, 10% are in children. Our spokesperson and ourselves as our group have said the decision to reopen schools at full capacity at the current level of infection is reckless. The failure to recommend simple and effective mitigations in schools against an airborne disease during a national surge in illness in hospitals, illness and hospitalisations has left our children and school staff to fend for themselves. The moral injury and health implications of this will have devastating impacts on thousands of families and school communities. We condemn statements made by the Minister and the Chief Medical Officer to reassure parents, children and school staff that their best interests have been acted on when no clear representative evidence has been made public to support such reassurances.
Thanks for that, Olive. Rodri, did you want to go through the outstanding issues?
I do. Good evening, everybody. My name is Rodri. I'm principal down in County Cork. So I'm well aware of all the challenges that we've been facing for the last number of months and years. So the outstanding issues going into the new term is obviously the mask element of things. There's been guidance in the last couple of days in relation to improvement of the quality of masks that staff members predominantly should be wearing, and children if possible. So a supply of FFP2 masks. However, getting them and the cost of them is a big challenge for schools to overcome. For example, I'm in the process of ordering them. Whether I have them tomorrow or not is another question. But staff will be bringing their own KN95s, FFP2 quality masks in with them, and we will reimburse for the time being. And then the board will offer masks. CO2 monitors. Again, we need to be engineers. I think I've become an engineer, a public health expert at this stage with the role that is evolving with COVID. But again, as to what rooms need them, predominantly the larger classrooms, the larger population congregation of pupils need the CO2 monitors, and then to be able to monitor the figures that we see on those monitors, to open windows, to even having to evacuate the class every so often to allow the classrooms to breathe, and staffing issues. My day-to-day has been spent looking for subs. I'm in double figures and rising for tomorrow. A quarter of my staff are out tomorrow. And that's before the term has officially started. And then we have the unknown factor, how many pupils will be able to come back into schools tomorrow. So there are those challenges that boards of management are likely, we would have hoped, have already had a conversation about before now. What is the magic number to be able to accommodate all those classrooms? What is the magic number when a class will have to be asked to stay at home when there isn't enough staff? So these are all issues that are outstanding. They will be outstanding. These are things that we have been asking from our local representatives time and time again. And still, there's question marks over them all. It's going to be a rocky enough term as it is. But I suppose I'm asking as a school leader, I'm very fortunate to have fantastic staff to support me in what I'm trying to do, and I wouldn't be able to do it without them. HEPA filters, we're in the process of ordering. We have some in already, we'll have more in, but the grants are not enough. Not enough. What we're getting, yes, we got an additional 50% on top of the minor works. That's not going to cover what is required. So there are, even with your FFP2 masks, they're more expensive than the surgical grade masks. So the money has to come from somewhere as well. So if we are going to go in and try to be as safe as possible, then these are a given. They should be a given. We shouldn't have to ask for them. They should be given to us, even centrally procured. Too late, it seems, at this stage. So these are some of the outstanding issues that face us all going into school tomorrow. However, we will continue to our best. And once again, just to, I suppose, reiterate the masks, like World Health Organization, UNICEF, they've given their recommendation. 6 to 11-year-olds should wear masks where there is widespread transmission. The whole country is widespread transmission, isn't it, presently? And again, there's mask mandates across the European Union. France compulsory in all primary schools, Italy 6 and over, Greece mandated to nursery school children, and they're changed 3 times a day. It's the minimum that should happen here. It's only guidance presently, and it's not mandated. And these are further challenges that we started to face before Christmas. Large percentage of our 3rd to 6th class pupils did wear masks. There are some that can't, won't. There are exemptions, but it's an ongoing challenge once again. So I think that is it from me. Is anybody else taking over this next step? Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Rodri. Jana, where are we time-wise, and anything else?
I mean, we can keep going. I asked Paul there, and people are still engaged on YouTube and responding to what's going on. Our numbers are the same as they were half an hour ago. We're near the end now anyway. I think the only 2 things left are to discuss our options realistically for tomorrow, and some possible steps that we can take in the next few days.
Brilliant. Is there anyone who wants to take this slide? Andrew, are you okay? Or Jessalyn? Rodri? Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy. Yeah, I'm happy to keep going. So we're opening tomorrow, whether we want to or not, whether we like to or not, whether we feel comfortable or not. It seems that decision has been made. So therefore, we need to put our best foot forward and, 1, keep ourselves safe, keep our staff safe, keep our pupils safe as much as possible. So what are the options? Well, you know, we should be, as school communities, communicating. We received notification or letters today from Department of Health and Department of Education, a memo from Dr. John Cudahy, Acting HSE National Clinical Director of Public Protection, and reminding of infection prevention and control measures. So all schools would have received them, just reminding of not to send children in with symptoms, etc. What we were already doing before Christmas, yet not sure if it made that much of a difference, but we continue to communicate. Increasing transmission among children, look, it's a given that Omicron is a lot more transmissible. We're going to see an impact in our classrooms. What is important is that we follow our COVID response plans in schools. It's not perfect. Nobody said it's going to be perfect. But collectively as school communities, you work together to ensure that everybody stays as safe as possible in very challenging circumstances. The absences, staff absences, I know what I'm reading on social media over the last day leading up to Christmas. The subs are not there. Absences are huge. Classes have been sent home. We've been close to sending classrooms home or not asking them to come into school because of staff. I have no set tomorrow. They're either all in classrooms or they're absent or so on. So that's the reality of schools at the moment. The close contact elements of things, you know, the antigen element that came into play, we're using them, we're communicating with them. Like many schools, I think leading up to Christmas, I think we had 6 consecutive weeks of cases every day. I think I had 2 days, and I'm not looking for sympathy, I had 2 days with no cases. That was a day after Storm Barra, and the Sunday after that, I had no cases to report, which was great for me, but it showed how difficult it is in school communities. Looking at class and school closures, I think we've already spoken about this. I suppose for us to be able to close classes, we have to ring this magic helpline that we have been offered. And again, it's been reported that we are waiting days, a week before we get responses. With Omicron, we expect cases to be higher and higher and higher. Can these magic helplines help us, guide us? Time will tell. I'm not overly optimistic. And I suppose we're looking at long COVID, the serious issues of long COVID in our pupils, in our staff members as well. I think it really, I'm going back to some of the suggestion that Paul Murphy gave earlier, being able to publicize on social media the reality of what we're facing, keeping it out there, keeping it in front of everybody's eyes. This is the reality in schools. I think it is key that we do this. It would be nice if the reality of schools are recognized by those that can actually make changes, sitting around that magic round table in the ivory towers. We need the reality of schools to be listened by the Department of Public Health, Department of Education, so changes can be made. I'm concerned as to what the next couple of weeks will bring, but I think sadly we have to go in tomorrow and we have to do our best. We have to look after our colleagues. We have to look after our pupils. Does anybody from the committee have anything to add to this? Okay, so we have some suggestions coming through here. Does anybody want to go through this?
I've been speaking a lot, I think. Is there anybody else? Jesslyn, or are you still on the line? Do you want to go through these?
Hi, Andrew here. Do you want me to go through?
Thanks, Andrew.
Stuff, yeah, I'm still here. Apologies for the dog. I feel like Dr. Evil here. So anyway, to keep him quiet. Look, we spoke a lot about the unions and the politicians and how absolutely this is the government's fault, 100%. Yes, the unions should have been way, way stronger. I agree with Ruth and Paul 100% on that. We should have had ballots in our back pockets, ready to go for this situation. We do need to overturn that Industrial Relations Act 1990, which is really important that people get into their trade unions, go to their branch meeting and have that legislation overturned, because it does tie the hands of trade unions behind their back in terms of immediate action, in terms of things like this. Having said that, if the unions had have acted all together, realistically, what could have been done if they all decided they weren't going back in terms of legalities, in terms of all of that, if they all stood shoulder to shoulder and together, and not just the three unions, apologies, I include Forza and SIPTU and all the education workers who are in there. What the reality is, what could they have done if we did all act collectively? Remains to be seen. From here, where do we go? We can't. I said yesterday to somebody, it's like a bubble, the balloon. Someone stuck a pin in the balloon and it's gone. The air is gone and it's deflated. We can't allow that to happen. We have to keep this going. I 100% believe we have to ask that it's remote learning from tomorrow. I know it's late in the day, but it's remote learning very, very quickly. And we asked for a so-called circuit breaker, and that was we returned to remote learning, because it is just not safe at the moment to go back into schools. We don't know what this virus does long term. You can see there on the screen, we're in the midst of a peak, or not even at the height of the peak yet. It is very, very dangerous. Even if it is just a headache and vomiting for 2 or 3 days for kids, and it's not hospitalizations. Do you want hundreds of kids around the country to be sitting in their bed vomiting and getting headaches and being sick and Absolutely not. This is horrendous stuff that's been proposed. The question was asked on YouTube, why is this happening? Why? My view is they didn't, for years and years, they didn't put anything into the health service. They didn't put anything into schools. They never put any funding, any money. In fact, they've reduced everything all along the way. And now they just don't have the capacity to deal with this crisis. And you can see that clearly now when there's no PCR testing available, and everything is up in arms. They're turning to antigen tests, which absolutely are great, but of course they were calling them snake oil a few weeks ago. But now they have to use them because there is no alternative. Staff in schools, as Rodri has just perfectly outlined there, it's going to be an absolute mess next week. There's going to be some students having different education because their class may be closed. They may have 3 or 4 classes in a row and so on. It's going to be an absolute mess. So on those terms, we do need to ask, and we still can't give a hope. There has to be a circuit breaker, and I would like to see the opposition call for a circuit breaker instead of the usual speeches and how on the side of teachers they are and on the side of teachers and students that they need to call this as it is. This is disgraceful, what is happening. And so I think for us, sorry, the dog again, I think for us short term, what we need to do is we need this online petition. I've always been against petitions. I don't think they achieve much, but if we can get thousands to sign this petition, parents, students, teachers, SNAs, everybody to sign this petition, it may have some sort of last gasp attempt. We need to get back onto our trade unions again, asking them to be far, far stronger on these issues. Can they possibly stand together and put up some sort of front to defend the workers that they represent? Can they do that regardless of the situation that they find themselves in terms of Industrial Relations Act? We need to ask that questions of them. We need to keep that pressure on. Emails, again, to all the various politicians if you can. Also, I do have to say this too, one of my pet hates is Twitter, right? Twitter is not activism. Twitter is not being active. Twitter is just saying something on a screen. We need to actually get active. We need to call each other. We need to email. We need to do the petitions. We need to create as much noise as possible. I know very, very difficult when it's tomorrow, but even for next week, the week after, and we need to get active in our trade unions. We need to go back to our trade union branches. We need to really activate these trade unions. I can't say that enough, because we may be, despite this time, we may be back here again in 6 months' time, or back here again next September, or back here again in January. We don't know. And we need to have ballots from all the trade unions in the back pocket, ready to go if this situation does arise again. We need to talk to people who are teachers, who are not teachers, our friends. We need to make as much noise as possible as we can in this situation. I think, minimum temperatures as well is another route that Paul talked about too, is something that possibly we can use when we go back to school. I think I'm going to leave it there and just leave. I think Mairead wants to come in and say a few words as well, but again, I've nothing written down here. I'm just talking from the top of my head of what we can do and the frustration that is there. And thank you to everybody who has spoken and to everybody who's watching on YouTube and all the rest. Please do go out there. Do not leave the balloon deflate. We need to do something about this, and we really need to get behind each other. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Andrew. Mairead, do you want to speak now?
Yeah, I can. Thanks very much, Elaine. Hi, everyone. This is Mairead de Borca. Apologies, my camera's off. Fantastic there from Vicky about the pregnant staff. And we've really left down our pregnant members, our high-risk members and our very high-risk members, and our set who are working in every single classroom now and being subs every day. They don't know what's going to happen to them each day that they're going to school, and neither do their pupils. It's just a disgrace. But I want to say to you all this evening, heads up, be proud, because you're keeping schools open despite those who should be helping us. In my opinion, I think we must have the worst leaders at the worst time right now. It's just crazy what's being done to us and to the children. The political people who attended today, I'm so glad that they did. It's really interesting to hear different people's point of views, and I would urge them to leave the normal methods of asking, please, can you have a meeting with us? And maybe do things a little bit differently. Maybe all join together and maybe ask for a vote of no confidence in the minister to get things going. We have to get off the political fence and call for a circuit breaker. And all the 4 unions should come together as well in unity, as well as parents and teachers, as we are doing today. Because tomorrow, going back tomorrow as we are, is so unsafe. We all know it. Olive was just telling us there that there's no data on child hospitalizations or cases for the last 2 weeks, but she was able to find out that approximately 10% of all hospitalizations to date are children. Now that's pretty shocking. But no talk about teaching staff or SNAs and caretakers and secretaries and all the other wonderful people who work in our schools. Well, I'm here now today to say, let everybody think of yourself as well. The order of business should be 1, make schools safe, 2, reopen them, not the other way around. We all need to call for a circuit breaker. The minister thanked us yesterday for our goodwill. I urge you all to put the goodwill to self-care. And I'd ask you to do it like this. Masks. Think of your masks. FFP2, KN95. If you can't get them for tomorrow, then wear 2 masks. Wear the blue mask and a cloth mask, one over or one under, whichever way is more comfortable to you. What you're looking for is a tight fit, no gaps, and as many layers as possible. You must protect yourself. I'm going to say goggles. Now you might say I'm crazy, but at the very start of all this in Wuhan, they warned that COVID could go in through the eyes. So consider that, or wear glasses. Social distance, even though it's an airborne virus, look at how you teach. Give up the folderols. I would say talk and chalk. We've moved from that now. Go back and teach the most safe way you can for everybody in that room. Windows, open them up. Dress warmly. Get your wardrobe ready for the morning and dress in layers. And let the children wear their layers. Let them wear their coats, their scarves, their hats, whatever they want to wear to keep them warm. It's a disgrace. Of course, you've heard about the temperature, and that is a union directive, and it's a law that you do not have to work in those freezing temperatures. Raise a ruckus about it. And the length of the school day, let me talk to you about that, because our members are doing more and more and more hours for nothing. And if the minister wants to see a bit of goodwill, maybe she'd like to do a bit of extra supervision in the mornings and in the evenings and in the yard. Maybe she'd like to have no lunch or no coffee or no toilet break. Look at yourselves, what you're doing. You are primary, supposed to work for 5 hours and 40 minutes. That 40 minutes includes your 30 minutes lunch break and your 10 minutes small break. Now, you'll be doing yard duty during that as well. So that means you're teaching for 5 hours. So if your school day starts at 9 o'clock, it doesn't mean you have to be in 20 minutes before 9 o'clock, as many people are misled to believe. No, it means you're in at 9, you start teaching at 20 past 9, because that 20 minutes of assembly time is not extra onto your 5 hours, 40 minutes. Look what you're doing. Look at your goodwill. Look at your self-care and get home to safety.
Thanks very much.
I think that's all I can say, except one other thing. And I don't mean to be facetious, but it's going to be dangerous out there, and it's going to be like Lanigan's Ball.
Thanks very much, Mairead. Elaine, just before you close, my name is Jana speaking. I'm one of the teachers who are involved with Glor. And thank you to the local reps and the politicians who came today and gave us the respect to listen to our experiences. But on behalf of anyone here who is watching, I would urge you to put in a vote of no confidence to Minister Foley. She's not up for the job. It's clearly obvious. Enough is enough now at this stage. If you're going to be here and speaking to us, giving us your support, you need to put your money where your mouth is. That goes for all opposition parties, the ones who are here and the ones who did not make it today. And also, if you really are taking seriously what we are saying, we would urge you to please bring back the demand for a short-term move to remote learning, not because we don't want to be in school. We all love our jobs. Remote learning was not easy for the children nor the staff alike, but it's urgently necessary at the moment when we have a 52% positivity rate in the community. And I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Jana. Likewise, I just want to thank everybody who contributed here this evening. Apologies for the lateness of the hour, but I think it's really important for people to see that, you're not on your own. I certainly felt like I was on my own until I got involved only a couple of days ago, but you're not on your own. Know that we're all here. And really, the only thing I can say is please turn off the laptop, try and enjoy the next few hours with your families before you go into work tomorrow morning. And just above all, be safe. And as Mairead said, enough with the extra time and the generosity of our goodwill, our emotional well-being, our mental health. We have to start looking after ourselves, because if we don't look after ourselves, no one else will. And we're too important to the people who we don't teach or work with. We're far too important to the people that we come home to every evening. So just to close, thank you again so much for all your support, everybody. Thanks to all the guys who put all of this together. Ihawa, stay safe.